For over a decade, Two and a Half Men was one of the most consistently watched sitcoms in American television history. Week after week, millions of viewers tuned in to watch the chaos, the laughter, and the dysfunction playing out inside that familiar Malibu beach house. The show survived cast shakeups, public scandals, and the kind of behind-the-scenes drama that would have destroyed most productions long before their final season. And yet, when it all came to an end, it wasn't a quiet farewell. It was a piano dropping from the sky, a body double standing at a doorstep, and a creator looking directly into the camera with something sharp to say. That final scene sparked more debate than almost any ending in sitcom history. To truly understand what it meant and why it landed the way it did, you have to understand the full story of how the show got there. Two and a Half Men was born in 2003 from an unlikely source, a casual conversation at a Los Angeles bar. Chuck Lorre, one of the most productive comedy writers working in Hollywood at the time, was speaking with a recently divorced friend who was struggling to raise his young son while his carefree bachelor brother shared the same home. That tension between responsibility and freedom, between the man who had obligations and the man who refused to have any, became the emotional engine of the entire series. The original concept that came out of those early discussions was actually quite different from what eventually aired. The first version featured a single father with a gay brother and a straight son. CBS, cautious about potential controversy and concerned about audience reception, pushed the creators towards something simpler and more conventional. What emerged was cleaner and more accessible. A jingle writer who lived without rules, his anxious chiropractor brother who couldn't stop making them, and a young boy caught somewhere between their two worlds. That triangle carried the show for 12 seasons. Getting the series onto television was not without significant difficulty. Just 2 weeks before the pilot was scheduled to film, CBS nearly canceled the project entirely due to production costs that reached well over $1 million per episode, a figure that was considered unusual for a sitcom at the time. Chuck Lorre accepted a personal salary reduction of 25% and renegotiated cast contracts to keep the project alive. By August 2003, the show was officially greenlit. 6 weeks later, it had a title, a theme song Lorre reportedly composed in under an hour, and a premiere date. What it didn't have yet was any idea of how enormous it was about to become. From the beginning, Charlie Sheen was the gravitational center of the show. His character, Charlie Harper, was built around a very specific kind of masculine fantasy. A man with money, a beach house, no real commitments, and the ability to charm his way through any situation without consequence. Audiences loved it. By the 2008 to 2009 television season, the show was pulling in more than 15 million viewers per episode, and Sheen had become the highest paid actor on American television. What made Sheen's performance fascinating was how naturally it seemed to fit him. The line between the character he was playing and the life he was reportedly living had always been blurry, and audiences sensed that. There's a kind of permission embedded in watching Charlie Harper. Permission to laugh at someone who behaved badly and faced no real reckoning for it. That fantasy worked for years. Behind the cameras, however, the reality was far more complicated. Sheen had struggled with substance use for much of his adult life. And by the later seasons of the show, those struggles were becoming impossible to contain within production schedule. There were episodes where he reportedly arrived on set unable to stand without assistance. Writers redistributed his dialogue to other cast members just to keep filming moving. His relationship with Chuck Lorre deteriorated into open hostility. He tore through scripts in front of colleagues, demanded rewrites, and by 2011 was publicly attacking the creator of the show that had made him one of the wealthiest actors in the world. The breaking point came in February of 2011. In a series of radio interviews and public appearances, she made statements that were erratic, combative, and deeply strange. He described himself using invented mythology, made exaggerated claims about his own invincibility, and seemed to be unraveling in real time in front of an audience of millions. When he joined Twitter, he gained 1 million followers in a single day, not because people admired him, but because they couldn't look away. On March 7th, 2011, CBS and Warner Brothers fired Charlie Sheen. The termination letter ran 11 pages. Approximately 200 people who worked on the show lost work immediately. 8 episodes that had already been planned were canceled. The financial damage was estimated at $10 million. And yet, the studio made the call anyway, which said something meaningful about how untenable the situation had become. Finding someone to replace Sheen was an urgent and pressurized process. Hugh Grant was reportedly very close to taking the role, with negotiations progressing to the point where a deal seemed likely. When those talks collapsed in May 2011, the production was days away from a major advertiser presentation with no lead actor confirmed. Ashton Kutcher's name entered the conversation on May 12, 2011. By the following day, the deal was done. Kutcher signed on for one season at a total of $20 million. And CBS announced the casting before the advertiser presentation took place. Reactions were mixed. Kutcher had built his reputation on charm and comedic instinct, but his audience skewed younger than the show's established viewership, and many critics questioned whether the series could survive such a fundamental change. The Season 9 premiere answered that question with numbers. More than 28 million people watched the episode, roughly double the show's average at that point. Most of them came to see how Charlie Harper's death would be handled. The show killed him off in Paris, struck by a train, which was darkly funny in a way that felt exactly right. The new character, Walden Schmidt, was introduced as a tech billionaire whose life had just fallen apart following a painful divorce. He was wealthy, yes, but also emotionally fragile, socially awkward, and genuinely lost. Kutcher played him with a sincerity that separated him clearly from the character he was replacing. Alan Harper, who had spent 8 seasons as the butt of nearly every joke, suddenly found himself in the unfamiliar position of being the more experienced person in the house. That reversal gave Jon Cryer material he hadn't had access to in years, and he used it well. The dynamic between Alan and Walden gave the show a different kind of energy, less swagger, more genuine human fumbling. No departure from 2.5 Men generated more genuine shock than Angus T. Jones. He had joined the show as a 10-year-old child, grown up on camera across nearly a decade, and become one of the highest-paid child actors in television history at $300,000 per episode. Then, in 2012, he appeared in a video connected to a religious organization and told viewers directly to stop watching the show he was starring in. His reasoning was sincere. Jones had embraced the Seventh-day Adventist faith, and working on a show built around adult humor, sexual comedy, and substance jokes had become something he found genuinely incompatible with his beliefs. He had already begun asking writers to minimize his involvement in scenes he found offensive. By the time the video was published, he had been carrying those feelings for a long time. The fallout was immediate. Jon Cryer and Ashton Kutcher found the situation difficult to navigate. Chuck Lorre was publicly upset, and Jones himself, despite issuing an apology the following day, one that expressed regret for any harm caused to his colleagues without withdrawing his actual criticism of the content, found himself increasingly isolated on set. By the 11th season, his appearances had dwindled significantly. By 2014, it was confirmed he would not return for the final season. He later enrolled at the University of Colorado Boulder to study environmental and Jewish studies, and described the years following his departure as the most peaceful of his life. CBS began promoting the series' finale months in advance. The episode was titled Of Course He's Dead, and promotional materials strongly hinted at the possible return of Charlie Harper. Charlie Sheen himself posted cryptic messages a day before the finale aired, suggesting he would not appear while simultaneously fueling speculation. The production team had filmed the finale in January 2015 with extraordinary secrecy. Actors received only the pages involving their own scenes, and certain sections of the script were deliberately obscured to prevent leaks. On February 19, 2015, 13.5 million people watched the finale. The episode delivered answers, a few surprises, and one scene that nobody entirely expected. After a full episode of build-up suggesting that Charlie Harper might still be alive, a figure who looked very much like the character approached the front door of the Malibu beach house and rang the bell. Then, without warning, a grand piano fell from above and crushed him. The scene lasted only seconds. Immediately after, Chuck Lorre himself stepped in front of the camera, smiled at the audience, and was immediately killed by another falling piano. The screen went black. The message embedded in that ending was widely interpreted as Laurie settling a score, not violently, but symbolically and publicly. The character that had defined show's identity, that had nearly destroyed the production from within, was killed the moment he tried to return. And then the creator stepped into his own story and got hit too, as if to say that nobody who touched this particular fire came out entirely clean. Whether it was petty or brilliant depended entirely on who you asked. Many viewers found it satisfying in its honesty. Others felt it undermined the show's own characters by making the ending about real-world conflict rather than the fictional world viewers had invested in for 12 years. Angus T. Jones briefly returned for the episode as well, appearing long enough to show Jake Harper as a self-sufficient adult who had quietly prospered. A small but deliberate grace note for a character who deserved one. 2.5 Men ran for 12 seasons, survived the firing of its highest-paid star, brought in a replacement who kept the ratings respectable, and ended on its own terms. That is a genuinely unusual story for any television series. But the finale's final moments pulled back the curtain in a way that few endings ever do. It acknowledged, openly and with dark humor, that the show had been built on a very specific kind of chaos, and that the chaos had eventually consumed itself. Chuck Lorre did not pretend the story ended neatly. He rode himself into the wreckage. And in doing so, he created a finale that was not really about Alan Harper or Walden Schmidt or even Charlie Harper. It was about the entire strange, turbulent experience of making one of the biggest sitcoms in television history, and what it costs when the thing you build starts to burn.